Back to the Denver Radio Real Estate Show. I'm Cheryl Garlock with Colorado Front Range Properties. So glad you guys could join us here today. Now, I was just talking about selling your home a minute ago here, and if you are thinking about doing that and you don't really know what you want to do or how you want to do it, you need some help, you need some tips. Aside from calling me, go to denverrealty.com and scroll down halfway through the homepage, there right below the panoramic image. There is a guide for sellers there called Tips for Surviving Your Home Sale. And even though we have a hot real estate market, trust me, you can always use some tips about surviving your home sale. And something that helps you and your realtor on that thing there's some tips about getting it prepped just like you're selling it, if you have those homes that are already staged and looking like they are on TV. Of course, George is going to help us a lot with that as well. How to shorten the selling process, I know that's important too. And there's a worksheet in there about what's great about your house, the neighborhood, what are the great elements that buyer is going to be looking for besides just the physical characteristics of the home. Take a look at that. It's called Tips for Surviving Your Home Sale. It's a guide to home sellers there at denverrealty.com. Go right there and get that there. And call me, 720-373-0654. Now, Barb Lewis from RMG Engineers has come into the studio here today, and I've got to ask you guys a question. If you've bought a home before, maybe you did or didn't have this experience, but should you've had a structural inspection on that home separate from a general home inspection? What do you think? Well, Barb is going to help us with that, aren't you, Barb?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So tell us, first of all, how is it that a structural home inspection is different than a regular home inspection?
The difference really is kind of the difference between a general practitioner doctor and a specialist. You go to the general practitioner, and he's maybe not an orthopedist, but he knows what to look at to say that you really need to get an orthopedic surgeon to look at your hips.
Yeah, that's right. You need to have that extra engineer to actually really go ahead and look at the structural foundation.
Exactly. At the bones of the house.
At the bones of the house. That's right. That's right. Because a lot of times things are kind of, and a lot of times we find this to be the fact when we go into a basement and there's sheetrock everywhere. Well, it's finished. How can you tell?
Well, a lot of times people can't tell. I had an experience just recently where people had been renting a house for 2 years, didn't realize they had significant structural issues, and until they decided to buy it from their landlord, and they called a home inspector. He said, get an engineer. That was me, and I had to tell them, you've got walls that are failing.
Wow. Well, you know what the good news is for them is, I'm taking a guess here, were they able to go ahead and get your services before they closed on the transaction?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. And I've actually closed on transactions where, in all honesty, it doesn't happen very often, okay, where the buyer does buy a home that is structurally damaged. Well, of course I've had that happen. I've only been doing this for 34 years, so I've had just about everything happen there. But it is interesting because we do get a structural engineer in there to look at the foundation, and not only that, just to tell them what the problem is, now you need to know and tell them how to rectify it. Isn't that right?
That's right, yes.
So, tell people what they can actually expect to find when you come out to visit the home. What do you look for?
Well, one of the key things I'm looking at is drainage, because probably 90-some% of structural issues start with bad drainage that allows water to get near the foundation, that can cause foundation movement. That's a key. And then when I go through the house, I'm looking for cracks. I'm looking not as much for just individual straight cracks, but I'm looking for patterns, and I'm looking for diagonal cracks that indicate that the drywall is actually torn and that there really is something structural going on.
Yeah, sometimes I get people who get they mistaken a crack for a seam that from where the taping job on a drywall is not done well. I'm going,
right.
That's just a bad tape job.
Yes.
Let's not get that confused. And cracking, all homes have, generally speaking, some form of cracking in there. So it doesn't mean that you need to get freaked out by the hairline crack.
That's right.
But you know the ones that, like you said, diagonal, like often you'll see this sometimes around windows or doors, and certainly if you can fit a quarter in there, you might have an issue.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes. Generally, a hairline crack is not an issue.
Right. And I've always say sometimes too, if you can go ahead and you're walking on the floor and all of a sudden it feels like you're walking downhill and you're not even walking by a drain, you might have a problem.
Yeah, in our areas, floors aren't necessarily structural, so and it might take an engineer to know if it's supposed to be part of the structure or not.
But now then, also though, you can fix some of these problems.
Absolutely.
They just cost money. That's all, you guys. They just cost money. But you need to go ahead and decide that now. So if you are looking at a home and you have an engineer out there and they determine that it's got some flaws and some problems, and you definitely want to bring this to the attention of the owner, and do it in writing, by the way, absolutely, and make a little bit better opportunity for negotiation, wouldn't you say? Would that be about right, Barb?
That would be right, yes. I think it's always better to have that come out before you've committed, when it can be addressed. And it's even better probably for the seller if he knows ahead if he's got an issue. So if he thinks he has an issue, it might be a good thing for him to bring out a structural engineer.
You bring up a really good point there, and that is true. Sometimes, as a realtor, we'll go into a property and we have certain pocket areas in this town, and if you want to know what those pocket areas are, call me, 720-373-0654. But we do have certain areas of town that are a little bit more prone to this expanding clay soil. I think it's called bentonite.
That's one name for it, yes.
Yeah, it's probably got a lot of other names, right, Barb?
Yeah, some of them you can't say on radio
okay.
That's what the homeowner calls it.
That's right, that's what the homeowner calls it. But anyway, sometimes it is a good idea for sellers to go ahead and sort of pony up, you might say, okay, and face the music that they got a problem and know in advance what they got. And then a good realtor can help you figure out the right path along with the structural engineer to how to address it. And there are options and there are choices there as far as handling that. But you've got to realize that you're going to find out if you got structural problems, it's going to surface at some point in time, and that's why you need a structural engineer. Hey, now you need to stay tuned for more from the Denver Radio Real Estate Show, because we've got some properties that we are going to showcase and share with you coming your way. You'll be able to go ahead and check these out also, again, at denverrealty.com. And give me a call. I'd like to answer your questions, 720-373-0654. We'll be right back.